As we dive into the final chapters of the book of Genesis, you're going to be encouraged as I, along with my friend Nathan, unpack the scriptures and the importance and power of blessing. You're not going to want to miss this episode.
Releasing blessing more often than not is your word, Scott. It's what we say. And God released blessings over his people with what he said. And it created prosperity or created health or created... In the same way, we are those who are to bless, and it usually comes by what we say. Life and death is in the power of the tongue.
Happy New Year, friends, and welcome to another calendar year of Portions Podcast. We actually start with the Hebrew calendar in the beginning of the book of Genesis, but as we're on this new year, 2023, I really want to encourage you, start the year off right. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you. And as we open up the scriptures today, Nathan, thank you so much for joining us, bro. I can't believe it's a brand new year. These years seem to be going by quickly.
Well, I'm just impressed you haven't gotten sick of having me help out. So, I mean, another year, you're just stuck with me, bro. But no, I'm good with that.
And even with this new year, I like the new wardrobe, the hat, the jacket.
I do what I can.
Very good.
You know, it's
welcome to 2023.
Thank you, sir.
And in this new year, I'm going to learn how to do a good handshake without messing up. But we're opening up the scriptures to the final portion of the book of Genesis. It's called Vayechi. It goes from Genesis 47 verse 28 to the last chapter of Genesis through the last verse. Now, it's really, really interesting because something we didn't talk about in last week's podcast was the fact that Jacob was dwelling in the land really of promise. He was in Canaan, right? And then Joseph called for him to come. And the last verse of last week's podcast was Genesis 47:27, where it says, "Now Jacob," or Israel, "lived in the land of Egypt in Goshen and acquired property and was fruitful and became very numerous." So I just want to back up for a minute, talk about Jacob moving.
Yeah.
You had mentioned some things off camera to maybe the potential conflict that it could have caused inside of him. Why don't you talk about that for a minute? Because in this particular portion, Jacob actually dies.
Yeah,
and then
true.
I want to talk about that. So why don't you just lead us into that?
Well, I just think from an empathy standpoint, I look at Jacob's life and I think, okay, he's living under the promise of Abraham that God's going to give a land, and he's in that land. Right?
He's in it.
And so with the famine and everything, the sons going down to Egypt, as we talked about in a previous episode, once he realizes Joseph's alive, he's got to make a decision if I'm going to go there or not, because Joseph is calling for him to come. And so I've just thought about if you go back Genesis 45 verse 28, the last scripture there, and Israel said, "I'm convinced my son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." Then you get into 46. "So Israel set out with all that was his, and when he reached Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in a vision that night and said, 'Jacob, here I am.' He replied, 'I am God, the God of your fathers. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt.'"
Wow.
To me, that is so, when I think of the kindness of the Lord, Scott, I think if I'm in Jacob's shoes, I'm nervous about going because I'm in the land of promise. Like, there's a lot riding on. God gave a promise to Abraham. I'm in the land. If I leave, is someone going to take that land? Will I ever come back? Am I giving up on the covenant? I mean, who knows what's going through his mind? So I'm just trying to empathetically think, this was a giant deal to leave the land and go into Egypt. And look at the kindness of the Lord. And this is just a great way, as we get in today's portion, the kindness of the Lord reassures him and says, "Hey, just in case you're nervous about this, I just want you to know it's okay to go. Don't be afraid to go."
Wow.
Think about the kindness of the Lord. So that sets us up, because otherwise he wouldn't get to see Joseph in person. But now, to your point, when you finish that portion, they've acquired land, they're prospering in the land, and this is where they are. And now, Jacob's at the end of his life. And in verse 29, when the time drew near for Israel to die, he called for his son Joseph and said to him, if I found favor in your eyes, put your hand under my thigh and promise that you'll show me kindness and faithfulness. Do not bury me in Egypt.
Wow.
Right? That thing is still inside of him. I'm grateful for this season. I'm grateful for all God's done. I'm grateful that I get to see not only, if we read further, not only my son, my grandchildren, I never thought I'd see, but this is not where I belong.
Wow.
I'm a man of promise. I'm part of the promise. I got to go back, even after I'm dead. Right?
Wow.
How powerful is that, Scott?
So
I
powerful.
love that.
When you brought out that scripture from 46:3, do not be afraid to go down to Egypt. So many times Egypt is likened to the world in scripture.
Sure.
I remember Keith Green's song way back from the 80s. So you want to go back to Egypt where it's warm and secure. Hey, look, God has delivered us from Egypt, which is really a picture of the world or sin or however you want to look at it. But it's so interesting to me that in Egypt, God prospered him.
Yes.
So his willingness to leave the land of promise, future promise, to go into a land from which God will ultimately deliver his people, yet in the midst of that, God allowed him to prosper. I'm just thinking of a scripture. You're in the world, but not of the world.
Yeah.
So many times as believers, we're afraid to venture into places where God might not be being glorified. We protect ourselves, we protect our kids.
Sure.
And that's great. I believe that the Lord has called some families to homeschool their children.
Yeah.
We homeschool ours.
Sure.
I believe the Lord has called some families to send their kids to a public school
100%.
or a private school.
100%.
Some God's called into America, some God has called into Afghanistan. The issue is what God said to Jacob. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
When we make our decisions based out of fear, they're going to be the wrong decisions all the time.
Right.
Even though we might cloak those decisions in spiritual language.
Sure.
Don't be afraid to go into the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because even there, I can bless you and protect you. Because you're called to be in the world, but not of the world, right?
Yeah.
So here, you pointed out, please do not bury me in Egypt, but when I lie down with my fathers, carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. I will do as you have said, Joseph said, and then Jacob said, swear to me.
Yeah.
So he swore to him. Then Israel, Jacob, bowed and worshiped the head of the bed. I just love that. I love that deep in Jacob's heart was an unwillingness to make his final resting place the world.
Man.
But that he knew ultimately that this world has been good to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I am not of Egypt.
I don't belong here.
I don't belong here.
Man, so powerful. And as we continue into this portion in chapter 48, again, the theme of my heart is the kindness of the Lord, and then the blessing that's released. Look at verse 5. Now then, your two sons born to you in Egypt. This is
48:5?
Yeah, 48:5. Before I came to you, I'm in the NIV. Before I came to you, here will be reckoned as mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be mine, just as Reuben and Simeon are mine. You look down in verse 11. Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face again, and now God has allowed me to see your children too. Again, this is an old man who has left his homeland. He's been reunited to his son who he thought was dead for years. And now he's worshiping the Lord in his final days. And again, there's so much sweetness in this when I read this. And he's just grateful. He's just grateful, right? The older we get, Scott, we're not old, but we're getting older. We're older than we've ever been. Think about that.
That's deep, bro.
Well, I do what I can. The older we get, the easier it is to have so many more disappointments, so many more frustrations, because you've had time to be dismissed or forgotten or all the things that we've talked about in previous episodes. So we can either get old and crusty and angry and bitter, or we can be released in gratitude and just have a sweetness about us. And I see Israel, Jacob in this season, he's just grateful. He's grateful. He's getting to see his son, and not only his son, his grandchildren as well. And so now he wants to release blessing. And I'm just telling you this, as I get older, Scott, I want to be one of those that the older I get, the more I just want to release blessing. I don't want to, you never did this, and everything Joseph could have done earlier. You all betrayed me. Man, Jacob's giving us a great example. In this season of life, man, just release the blessings.
I love it.
Release the blessings.
And even in the initial promise to Abraham, when God said, I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those, there's something about blessing.
Yeah.
There's something that happens to us. It's almost like we're fulfilling our purpose for who we're called to be
100%.
when we release blessing.
100%. If we are God's imagers in the earth, right?
Right.
We're created in his image.
Right.
Let me tell you this. There's many things you can say about God. He is a blesser.
He is a blesser.
That's who he is.
Wow.
He releases blessing. So I would say in some ways you never look more like your Father than when you're releasing blessing.
I love it.
And in our, we're here in America, in an American Western mindset, we typically, whether we like to admit it publicly or not, equate blessing with finance. Someone says, I got blessed recently. We're thinking, hey, something came in the mail. Someone gave you a handshake. Well, that can be a blessing. But releasing blessing more often than not is your word, Scott. It's what we say. And God released blessings over his people with what he said. And it created prosperity or created health or created... In the same way, we are those who are to bless, and it usually comes by what we say. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. And what happens? Jacob, Israel, releases blessings over Ephraim and Manasseh. And the episode starts there in verse 14. Israel reached out his right hand and put it on Ephraim's head, though he was younger. Crossing his arms, he put his left hand on Manasseh's head, even though Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, and there's the blessing there. And so Joseph is upset and is like, hey, you're putting your right hand on the younger. And he's like, yeah, that's on purpose. I might be old, but I'm doing something on purpose here. That's my paraphrase. There's a reason for this. And so he crosses his arms. But look at what it says in 19. But his father refused and said, I know, my son. I know he too will become a people. He too will become great. Nevertheless, his younger brother will be greater than he, and his descendants will become a group of nations. He blessed them that day and said, in your name will Israel pronounce this blessing. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. So this is powerful for so many reasons. We didn't read it for time's sake, but if you continue to go in 48, he goes and he blesses all of his sons, and he speaks blessings over each of them. But he starts with Ephraim and Manasseh and makes a declaration. In your name, Israel will pronounce this blessing. Well, to this day, on Shabbat, on Friday nights, there's a blessing that's spoken over the children, right? At the Shabbat meal, the oldest the father, the grandfather, the oldest patriarch in the home speaks a blessing over the children. It's a beautiful thing. What a beautiful heritage in the Jewish culture that every Friday, as many families can gather, share a meal. And it's not just about sharing the meal, which is great. It's about releasing blessing.
I love it.
And the blessing that is spoken over sons is this blessing every Friday night. Yesimcha Elohim Ephraim v'Manasseh. May God make you. Speaking of your own children, as a father, when my family gathers on Shabbat on Friday nights as often as we can, this is what I pray over my son.
I love it.
May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. Why? Because of what was spoken right here. The beautiful thing is, releasing blessing makes us look like our Father, because our Father's a blesser.
I love it.
And Scott, in a world with so much negativity, so much cursing, so much challenge, life is hard already. How beautiful would it be? How beautiful is it that God in his word, he gives Aaron, think about this as back in Numbers or forward in Numbers. He says, I want you, Aaron, to bless the people. I want you to do it. Well, why doesn't God just do it? God can speak the blessing. He's like, I want you to participate, and I'm going to give you the words to say, right? The priestly blessing, right? Why? Because there's power in your words when you release a blessing over people.
Wow.
And in a world with so much anxiety, fear, abandonment, identity issues, we can hear our Father proclaim a blessing over us. But then husbands, wives, fathers, mothers, man, let's be diligent to release blessing over our children.
I love it.
Because of what it produces and how it makes us really operate in the image of our Father. So
Yeah.
that's in my heart as I read this passage today, Scott. What do you
I
see?
love it, and I'm convicted because we have so much ability. You said life and death are in the power of the tongue. How we speak
Yes.
is so important. So important. And it's interesting because when Jacob, Israel died, in chapter 50, Israel dies, and verse 12, it says, thus his sons did for him as he had charged them. His sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave at Machpelah before Mamre, which Abraham had bought along with the field for a burial site from Ephron the Hittite. Verse 14, after he buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. And then this is very interesting. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said to themselves, what if Joseph bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong which we had did to them? On the heels of you saying that there's a power in blessing and there's a power in the words, Jacob's last act as a man alive was to pronounce blessing over his sons. Check this out, verse 16. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, your father charged before he died, saying, thus you shall say to Joseph. By the way, this might be fabricated.
Yeah, we don't know that he actually did this.
We don't know that he did this.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I think these guys are trying to cover their hide. Thus you shall say to Joseph, please forgive, I beg you, the transgression of your brothers and their sin, for they did you wrong. And now please forgive their transgression of the servants of the God of your father. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Now, we don't know why he's weeping. Maybe he's weeping because he feels like they didn't value his words before their father died. Maybe he's weeping because somehow he feels like they think that he might have done this just for Joseph or just for Israel's sake.
That's insightful.
Yeah, right? Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also came and fell before him and said, behold, we are your servants. By the way, is this possibly the interpretation of that dream for which he was thrown into prison? He could have just stood up right there and said, you're bowing down to me. Remember that dream that I gave you 22 honking years ago?
The ultimate told you so right there. Yeah.
Yeah, but look what Joseph does. But Joseph said to them, do not be afraid.
Do not be afraid.
For am I in God's place? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it good in order to bring about the present result, to preserve many people alive. And check this out, verse 21. So therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and for your little ones. So he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. What an ending.
It's beautiful.
What an ending. Joseph dies in the next few verses. But here you're talking about the power of blessing. Jacob blessed his children. At this point, if there was ever an opportunity for Jacob to spew curses and to curse these ones, even for lying about what their dad said, they fabricated this.
Yeah.
Joseph said, no, I have forgiven you.
Yeah.
And not only have I forgiven you, but I've forgiven your children. Because I'm not only going to provide for you, I'm going to provide for your little ones. Therefore, don't be afraid.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, Joseph's last words to his brothers that are really recorded here are words of blessing. I'm gonna take care of you.
Words of blessing.
I'm gonna take care of you. So I love that, bro. Maybe, would you be willing to pronounce that blessing that God spoke to Moses and Aaron to pronounce over his children, and to just close this podcast off. I mean, look, this is the first week of the new year.
Yeah.
And how cool would it be if we devoted ourselves, and I'm committing myself to this, to speak blessing over people.
Speak blessing.
May this year be a year where we choose to bless people. And when we find curses coming out of our mouth, that we would just catch ourselves. And rather than wishing harm or evil on someone, we would just wish, and not wish, that sounds too trite of a word, but we would just speak and proclaim the blessing of God, even over the ones who don't deserve it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Scott. And I want to pronounce that blessing. I just want to say, some people balk at the term of blessing or releasing blessing because, maybe a family member, a friend, a parent hasn't been blessable in their eyes, right? Hasn't been honorable, right? How do I give honor if they've not been honorable? And I just remind people when I've prayed with a group of men every single week for 7 years now.
Wow.
And Tuesday mornings really early we gather, and part of our time is we release blessings over our parents, over our spouses, over our children, right? In doing so, that's always a hurdle. I'll just say to those that are watching it or listening today, blessing and agreement are not the same thing, right? Honor and approval are not the same thing. I can honor someone's position and not necessarily approve of every single thing they've ever done, right? I can honor a parent that maybe wasn't a great parent, but because it blesses the father for me to do that. My point in saying this, when people feel like, well, I want to bless, but I don't know how do I do that to people that don't feel blessable. You leave that part to God, You just do what God's called you to do. And I want to pronounce this blessing not only over the listeners and viewers this new year, but Scott, over you, over Together for Israel, the incredible work you guys do. And so I'll just pronounce it and then I'll just pray for us. So, Ivarechecha Adonai vayishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yonecha, Yesa Adonai panav elecha vayasim lecha. Shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. And Lord, I just proclaim a blessing today over everyone listening, everyone viewing, God, not because I'm special, but because these are your words that you gave to be a blessing. And God, I just say that, Lord, you'd be delighted and glorified in Scott, his family, the ministry Together for Israel. Lord, you'd be glorified in every person today that's viewing and listening, that, Lord, they would just sense your love and approval today. And that, Father, from that place of receiving blessing, they would have a stockpile of your love, grace, and mercy to distribute. So make us generous, Lord, with our words. Make us generous with our blessing over our families, our children, our spouses, our parents, our friends, people that we think deserve it and people that we don't think deserve it. God, as we do, we'll reflect your kindness and your goodness. And in the same way you are merciful and kind to Jacob, to Joseph in their latter days, God, I pray the same would be said for everyone listening and viewing today. And I pray these things in Yeshua's precious name, Jesus the Messiah. Amen.
Amen. Nathan, thank you so much. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, buddy.
And Happy New Year to you. Thank you so much for joining in with us today. It's going to be a great year this year. We're diving into Exodus next week. I want to encourage you to be watching and listening. And I thank you so much for the way that you stand with us through your giving and through praying for us. We are, by God's grace, fulfilling his call on us to make a difference in Israel. And if the Lord puts it on your heart during this year to stand with us as a monthly partner, I want to encourage you. Go to togetherforisrael.org. Become a monthly partner with us. Our partnership is growing. Those people who give $25 or more a month is growing throughout the nations. And we are seeing lives changed in Israel because of the generosity of his children around the world. Thank you. May you be blessed. And I'll see you next week.